Welcome to Crypto Journal. If you value my daily content, hit like right now. And if you want exclusive content on institutional blockchain plays I can't share publicly, click join next to subscribe. Select the Plan Club membership and get early calls, insider analysis, and exclusive deep dives only for members. Let's get straight to the point. What if I told you that in 2025, the $30 trillion global trade system still operates on faxes, wedding signatures, and courier-delivered documents? What if small businesses lose $2.5 trillion annually because banks can't process their trade finance requests efficiently? And what if one blockchain network was specifically invited by the world's largest banks to solve this exact problem? And it's already processing real trade transactions across Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Today, we're exposing how XDC Network is solving the $5 trillion trade finance gap, why they're the only blockchain invited to join the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative alongside HSBC, Citi, and Standard Chartered, and why XDC's enterprise positioning could make it the most undervalued infrastructure play in crypto. This is 20 minutes that will change how you see real-world blockchain adoption. Let me start with the problem, because understanding the magnitude reveals why XDC's solution is transformational. The global trade finance gap reached $2.5 trillion in 2022, according to Deutsche Bank, and the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative estimates it at $5 trillion when including all underserved segments. This isn't theoretical money. This is real businesses, primarily small and medium enterprises, that can't access financing to fulfill orders, expand operations, or participate in global supply chains. Here's why this gap exists. Trade finance is absurdly inefficient. When a company in Germany wants to import goods from Thailand, they need a letter of credit from their bank confirming they'll pay the Thai supplier. That letter of credit is a paper document physically couriered between banks, requiring wedding signatures, manual verification, and days or weeks of processing. According to Cointelegraph, as of 2022, only 2% of bills of lading were issued electronically. The $30 trillion global trade system still runs on faxes. Small businesses suffer most. Banks reject 60 to 70% of SME trade finance applications not because businesses aren't creditworthy, but because manual processing makes small transactions unprofitable for banks. The paperwork costs more than the profit margin on small trade deals. So banks prioritize large corporate clients and reject SMEs entirely. This creates the gap. Businesses that could pay their loans can't access financing because the infrastructure is too expensive and slow. Now let's talk about XDC Network solution, because this is where blockchain technology delivers tangible value beyond speculation. XDC was purpose-built for trade finance digitization. Launched in 2019 by Xinfin, a Singapore fintech company founded by Ritesh Kukkad and Atul Kakade. XDC Network uses delegated proof of stake consensus to process over 2,000 transactions per second with sub-2-second finality and fees below 1 cent. But technical specs aren't what matters. What matters is XDC digitizes the documents that make trade finance work. Letters of credit, bills of lading, invoices, and promissory notes become tokenized digital assets on XDC blockchain. Instead of physical documents couriered between banks, these documents exist as blockchain tokens that can be verified instantly, transferred in seconds, and used as collateral for immediate financing. Here's the real-world impact. In Asia, an SME used an electronic bill of lading registered on XDC as collateral for a loan. The time from application to disbursement dropped from 2 weeks to under 3 hours. In Latin America, SMEs secured financing via tokenized invoices on XDC, accessing capital that traditional banks wouldn't provide. This isn't pilot program hype. This is operational infrastructure solving real problems for real businesses right now. Now let's examine the institutional validation that separates XDC from speculative blockchain projects. In August 2020, XDC Network became the first and only blockchain invited to join the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative. This consortium includes ABN AMRO, Santander Asset Management, ING Bank, SMBC, ANZ, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and other leading global financial institutions. They selected XDC specifically to bridge the $5 trillion trade finance gap through blockchain infrastructure. Andre Casterman, who spent over 20 years at Swift leading technology innovations in interbank payments and trade finance, is responsible for spearheading the TFD initiative. When he selected XDC Network, he stated, TFD initiative provides the most comprehensive set of trade distribution capabilities. We welcome Xinfin's XDC network as this enables us to bridge the $19 trillion trade finance asset class with any type of funder through tokenization and digital assets. This isn't retail hype. This is Swift's former innovation leader explicitly stating XDC enables institutions to tokenize the entire $19 trillion trade finance market. When banks want to make trade finance accessible to institutional investors, family offices, and non-bank funders, they're using XDC infrastructure to digitize and distribute those assets. XDC was also invited to join the International Trade and Forfeiting Association in 1999 as the first and only Layer 1 blockchain ecosystem member. ITFA represents companies, financial institutions, and intermediaries engaged in global trade. XDC joined IEFA's Digital Negotiable Instruments Initiative in November 2021, providing blockchain structure and interoperability for financial institutions to communicate across various platforms. Let me show you why XDC specifically was chosen over every other blockchain. First, KYC-compliant validator masternodes. XDC Network requires all validator masternodes to complete KYC verification. As of January 2025, there are 300-plus validator masternode candidates with 108 actively operating. This is explicitly mentioned in trade finance documentation as an exceptional feature. Banks need regulatory compliance. KYC validators provide that in ways fully anonymous blockchains can't. Second, hybrid public-private architecture. XDC offers Layer 2 subnet system, allowing users to launch sovereign, privacy-preserving sidechains that inherit XDC mainnet security. Government agencies, financial institutions, and businesses require dedicated blockchain environments with enhanced permissions and control. They can't operate on fully public blockchains where every transaction is visible. XDC's hybrid model solves this. Third, ISO 20022 compliance. XDC provides ISO 20022 API solution for financial institutions to send and receive financial data for cross-border and domestic payments. The simple API makes migrating to the new financial messaging standard seamless. Institutions can add instant settlement for digital assets within their financial messaging payload. When Swift completed migration on November 22nd, 2025, XDC was already positioned as ISO 20022 compatible settlement infrastructure. Fourth, interoperability with R3 Corda. XDC completed inter-business settlement proof of concept with R3 Corda, the enterprise blockchain used by over 300 financial institutions, including HSBC, ING, and NASDAQ. Corda doesn't have native settlement token. XDC bridges Corda to public blockchain infrastructure, enabling institutions to leverage both private permission networks and public blockchain transparency. Fifth, integration with Layer 0 protocol. In 2025, XDC integrated with Layer 0, enabling interoperability with 125-plus blockchains. This means trade finance assets tokenized on XDC can move to Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, or any other network. Institutions aren't locked into single blockchain. They can deploy multi-chain strategies where XDC handles trade finance and other networks handle different functions. Now let's talk about Tratech, because this reveals how XDC transforms trade finance into investable asset class. Tratech is the world's first trade finance-centric NFT issuance platform, created on XDC Network in late 2021. Tratech tokenizes trade finance instruments like invoices, letters of credit, and receivables, turning them into digital securities that institutional investors can purchase. This solves critical problem. Banks have limited capital to provide all the trade finance SMEs need. But institutional investors, pension funds, family offices, asset managers have trillions in capital-seeking yield. They traditionally couldn't access trade finance because instruments weren't standardized or liquid enough. Tratech on XDC changes this by creating marketplace where banks originate trade finance deals, tokenize them, and sell to institutional investors. The SME gets financing immediately. The bank gets capital to finance more deals. The institutional investor gets exposure to trade finance yield. Everyone wins. And XDC provides the blockchain infrastructure making this market possible. This is the vision Andre Casterman described, bridging $19 trillion trade finance asset class with institutional capital through tokenization. In 2023, through collaboration between Tratech and Securitize, XDC Network rolled out its first compliant US Treasury token called USDY. This represents blockchain-based versions of shares in US Treasury bond ETF. When BlackRock tokenizes US Treasuries, they need compliant blockchain infrastructure. Securitize chose XDC for that infrastructure because XDC was designed specifically for institutional regulatory requirements. Now let's examine SBI Holdings' strategic positioning with XDC, because this reveals how major financial institutions view XDC as potential. SBI Holdings, one of Japan's largest financial services companies, entered joint venture with Tratech to expand XDC network use cases in global economic activities, particularly trade finance. SBI launched SBI XDC Network APAC Corporation in December 2023 with 300 million yen capital, headquartered in Tokyo. SBI doesn't make speculative blockchain bets. They operate SBI Ripple Asia alongside SBI XDC Network APAC as complementary infrastructure serving Asia-Pacific markets. When institutions deploy both Ripple for payments and XDC for trade finance simultaneously, they're not choosing between technologies. They're building complete financial infrastructure stack where each network serves specific function. Let's talk about real adoption metrics, because this separates operational infrastructure from vaporware. XDC Network processes over 2,000 transactions per second with fees under 1 cent. The network has 300 plus validated masternode candidates with 108 actively operating. Major platforms built on XDC include Tratech for trade finance tokenization, Xinfin for invoice financing, and XDC Trade Network for digitizing bills of lading and letters of credit. In July 2025, 21 shares launched XDC Network EP on Euronext Paris and Amsterdam. This is physically backed, fully collateralized investment product giving European institutional investors regulated exposure to XDC. Banks, funds, and conservative allocators can now access XDC without exchange accounts or custody concerns. When regulated EP launches in one of the world's most conservative financial environments, that's institutional validation. Also in July 2025, Kraken added XDC to their asset listing roadmap. Kraken is one of the most regulated fiat to crypto exchanges globally, used by wealth advisors, compliance-heavy family offices, and US traders. Kraken listing would unlock not just trading volume, but institutional trust and accessibility. Here's the legal framework dimension that's accelerating adoption. The UK's Electronic Trade Documents Act passed in 2023, granting legal recognition to digital trade documents. This means electronic bills of lading, promissory notes, and letters of credit have same legal status as paper documents. Singapore's Trade Trust Framework, backed by Infocom Media Development Authority, provides open source infrastructure for trusted digital trade documents. XDC Trade Network integrates seamlessly with Trade Trust, enabling trusted interoperability among MLETR-compliant applications. The model law on electronic transferable records was developed by United Nations Commission on International Trade Law to enable digital equivalence of paper-based trade documents. XDC's compliance with MLETR means documents digitized on XDC have legal recognition globally. When legal frameworks catch up with technology and explicitly authorize blockchain-based trade documents, adoption accelerates dramatically. Banks that couldn't deploy blockchain solutions due to legal uncertainty can now do so with regulatory confidence. XDC positioned itself for this moment by building MLETR compliance and partnering with trade trust years before legal frameworks solidified. Now let's calculate the addressable market and why it justifies dramatically higher XDC valuations. The global trade finance market is $30 trillion annually. The trade finance gap, unmet demand from creditworthy businesses, is $5 trillion. If XDC captured just 1% of that gap through digitized trade finance infrastructure, that's $50 billion in trade finance flowing through XDC network annually. Current XDC market cap is approximately $2.2 billion with 17.75 billion circulating supply, trading at $0.06 per token. If XDC processes $50 billion annually in trade finance with even minimal transaction fees, network revenues and utility value would justify significantly higher valuations. Conservative institutional adoption models suggest 5-10x appreciation from current levels based purely on capturing small percentage of trade finance gap. But here's where it compounds. Tokenized trade finance creates new markets. When institutional investors can purchase tokenized invoices yielding 4 to 8% annually with blockchain transparency and instant settlement, trillions in institutional capital can flow into previously inaccessible trade finance market. This doesn't just fill the existing gap. This expands the entire market by making trade finance investable asset class for pension funds, endowments, and family offices. Let me show you the supply dynamics that amplify everything. XDC has 37.95 billion total supply, with 17.75 billion circulating. Network burns XDC with every transaction through fees. As transaction volumes increase through trade finance adoption, token burns accelerate, reducing supply while demand increases. This creates mathematical scarcity similar to Ethereum's EIP 1559 burn mechanism, but applied to trade finance transaction volumes. Moreover, XDC enables staking where holders can stake tokens to validate or masternodes and earn yields. This removes tokens from circulating supply available for trading. When institutional demand increases, staking reduces liquid supply and scarcity compounds. Price discovery historically accelerates. We saw this with Ethereum 2.0 staking. XDC's trade finance utility provides genuine demand beyond speculation. Now let's address the MICA dimension because this positions XDC for European institutional adoption. Markets in crypto assets regulation became enforceable across European Union in 2025, creating comprehensive framework for crypto service providers. XDC's institutional partnerships with European banks and its regulatory compliant architecture position it favorably under MICA frameworks. When European institutions deploy blockchain infrastructure, they need MICA compliant solutions. XDC's KYC masternodes, hybrid privacy architecture, and trade finance focus align with MICA requirements better than most public blockchains. As European adoption accelerates under clear regulatory frameworks, XDC's positioning as institutional-grade trade finance infrastructure becomes strategic advantage. Here's what most people miss about XDC. This isn't about replacing banks. This is about upgrading bank infrastructure. Financial institutions don't want to abandon trade finance business. They want to make it profitable by digitizing inefficient processes. XDC enables banks to maintain their client relationships and revenue streams while dramatically reducing operational costs through blockchain automation. When bank can process 10x more SME trade finance deals at fraction of current cost using XDC infrastructure, they capture market share from competitors still using fax machines. When institutional investors can access tokenized trade finance through Tratech on XDC, banks create new revenue streams distributing trade assets. XDC isn't disrupting traditional finance. It's providing infrastructure that makes traditional finance more efficient and profitable. Let me be crystal clear about what we're not saying. We're not saying XDC will hit specific price targets. We're not saying adoption is guaranteed. We're not saying there are no risks. Technology could fail at scale. Competitors could emerge. Regulatory frameworks could shift. Market conditions could deteriorate. This isn't financial advice. What we are saying, documented evidence shows XDC was specifically invited by world's largest banks to solve $5 trillion trade finance gap. They're the only blockchain in trade finance distribution initiative. They're already processing real trade transactions in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. They have institutional partnerships with SBI Holdings, HSBC, Standard Chartered, and others. And they're building infrastructure for $30 trillion market that desperately needs digitization. The current price of XDC at $0.06 doesn't reflect this institutional positioning. Markets are forward-looking, but not infinitely so. Until trade finance adoption becomes obvious through announced volumes and institutional partnerships, most investors won't position. When adoption accelerates and banks announce XDC integration for trade finance digitization, initial surge captures attention. But sustained price discovery as trillions in trade finance flows through XDC infrastructure is where generational wealth gets created. Now you understand why XDC isn't speculative moonshot, but infrastructure solving real trillion-dollar problem. You understand why world's largest banks invited XDC specifically to digitize trade finance. You understand the legal frameworks, institutional partnerships, and operational metrics proving this is real adoption. And you understand why $30 trillion trade market using faxes needs exactly what XDC provides. If this analysis changed your perspective on real-world blockchain utility and XDC's institutional positioning, smash that like button. And if you want exclusive deep dives on institutional plays like this that I can't share publicly, click Join, select the Plan Club membership, and get early calls, insider analysis, and exclusive content only for members. Drop a comment with your XDC price target if trade finance adoption materializes at scale. I read every comment. Let's see who's thinking about infrastructure solving real problems instead of chasing speculation. See you in the next one.